Hi guys, I just wanted to send out our quarterly connection with Kelsey video. If you don't know me already, I'm Kelsey. I am the trainer with Positively Trained and Pause for Responders. And every quarter we send out these quarterly connection videos to give you tips and tricks and advice and things to think about to help you with your dogs at home. So I'm going to pull up our presentation here. Things that I want to talk about this time. So this is our fourth volume of the Quarterly Connection with Kelsey. This is actually being released on New Year's Eve, December 31st of 2020. So there's a few things I want to touch on today. One is that this year has been interesting compared to previous years. So a lot of people have gone through a ton of life changes in 2020, but I do see a lot of these types of posts show up in social media talking about how the dogs are actually lucking out in a lot of different instances because they are getting to spend a lot more time with their people. So whether that's because you are now working from home, or if you have kids taking classes from home, or even just in general with a lot of the kind of lockdown requirements or the quarantine type stuff, we have not been going out as much. So we've been home a lot more with our dogs. Now, it's in theory great for the dogs, but as a trainer and as a trainer that's been working with a lot of people the last year in this pandemic, I'm noticing a lot of kind of common problem behaviors start cropping up that are directly related to how we've been kind of changing our lifestyle in the pandemic with our dogs. So I want to talk about that today. And the other big thing I want to point out is because it's New Year's Eve and tomorrow a lot of people are planning out all of those New Year's resolutions. Resolutions are fantastic, and I think that it's a really good practice to stick with. It's a good tradition. But essentially resolutions are just kind of wishes unless we have a plan. So I want to go through these actionable steps to make it really easy to address a lot of problem behaviors that you may be seeing with your dogs already, or if not, may start cropping up if we don't think about some of these things. So I want to talk through 7 training tips for preventing problems in the pandemic. Like I said, easy things to work on with your dog at home that hopefully will make a big difference in the success of this upcoming year with your dogs. So the first one is train in masks. So a lot of times we're not wearing our mask around the house with our dog. We're only wearing them when we go out into those kind of more public environments. So you may not even be wearing a mask if you are just walking around the neighborhood, depending on what the restrictions are in your area. So if your dog only sees you in a mask in those kind of high density situations where you're around a lot of other people, like the vet's office or the groomer, or those types of places, and they may start associating that you wearing the mask means something stressful might happen. Or maybe when you do actually have a stranger come to the house, if you have a contractor come over or something like that, and you have to wear a mask in that setting, and then it's a totally different experience for the dog because they have this new potentially scary person there. So just add in the mask to your normal routines. Wear your mask when you're playing games with the dog, wear them when you're teaching them new skills or when you go for a walk. Just start adding that in more. I know you probably are already pretty sick of wearing your mask, and I'm telling you to do it more, but throw it in every once in a while just so your dog associates that the mask is just something you wear. It's just like putting on a jacket. It's not that big of a deal, and it's pretty normal. So that's one to add into your normal routines. Don't make a big deal of it. Just put it on every so often. The other big one is get the dog out. I want you to take your dog on those outings and get them out moving around, associating with the whole world. Because if we are staying home a lot more, it might mean that we're not taking our dogs out to those more social environments. So if you are already doing lots of kind of normal neighborhood walks and that sort of stuff, that's great. But take your dog to those more crowded areas too. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're staying safe and everybody else is staying safe, but going to places where your dog might see other people walking by, seeing other dogs walking by, maybe they see kids playing in the playground if you go to a park, if that's, again, not a kind of restricted area in your area. Have your dog go places where they see lots of traffic going by. You might not have a super high traffic neighborhood, so going places where there's a lot of cars, loud trucks, that sort of thing. Think about things like bikes, skateboards, birds, squirrels, maybe balloons, or loud power tools and mowers and landscaping equipment and decorations, statues. There's so many things. We can go down the list of all the different things that you might see out on outing. Make sure you're still getting that type of exposure for your dog, because if they're not getting those things, if we've kind of narrowed down their world as well, dogs with limited exposure can develop fearful or reactive behavior. So I'm working with a lot of what we call them pandemic puppies right now, puppies that are being socialized during this time when things are a little bit more limited. And so if that's the case, if you're working with a younger dog that doesn't have a ton of exposure, still get them out. You don't have to work on making contact with people in order for it to count as socialization. And if you have an older dog, again, you don't have to work on those actual greetings or playtime with other dogs necessarily. You just want to work on that exposure piece. Is your dog noticing it? Did they hear the other dogs bark? Do they see the other dog in the distance? And then we can obviously do some training to help them cope with that if they're not super comfortable, but don't completely limit their exposure just because we're not going on as many outings as we used to do. I know for my dogs, they used to go and sit outside restaurants all the time, and we're just not eating at restaurants that often anymore. So I need to still practice that. I go sit at parks, or I take them even just into parking lots, sit at the Home Depot parking lot or whatever's close by for you, and let your dog watch people walking by, watch them pushing shopping carts, that sort of thing. Super helpful. The other side of that, kind of the flip side, is leave them home. So you might think that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but what I mean by this is leave them home alone. I want to make sure that you are leaving the house and your dog is not always going with you, because the other thing I've been noticing quite a lot is that people just take the dog everywhere because they can, because they're not going into the buildings. They're just doing a lot of, carry out or curbside pickup. And so the dog can just go on all of their errands with them. And so they're not getting that home alone time. Alternatively, if you're working from home and the kids are doing classes from home and everyone's just in the house all the time, you might not need to leave that day. And so now your dog is with you all the time and they're not practicing being left. If you do need to go on an errand and not take the dog, we don't want that to be traumatizing. And if you do go back to work, I want to make sure that it's not traumatizing for your dog to be left home alone all the time when they're not used to that. So practice leaving the house daily with your dog, or not with your dog. Practice leaving the house without your dog, with your dog practicing being left at home. And again, that could be while you run an errand, if you are leaving the house to go to work, even while doing chores outside. So I'm one that if I'm out gardening or something like that, I love to bring the dogs out with me, but I have been practicing intentional trips outside without the dog and making sure that they're okay being left in the house. If you really don't have any reason to leave necessarily, even just sitting outside in your car for a minute, just again to practice that association that it's okay when I leave, that's normal, it's something we do every day, so your dog doesn't get too worried about that. Sometimes I'll just go sit in my car and answer some emails on my phone and then pop back in the house just to get that practice. I don't know if you can see my dogs behind me now. I know the screen's pretty small and they're dark, so they're kind of in the shadows behind me. But this one, Katya, is like my Velcro dog. So she wants to be touching me all the time, with me all the time. And so for her, super important that I give her that solo time where she's not necessarily with me and she's practicing being left at home. The other big one is daily enrichment. So enrichment, we can break into a lot of different categories. If you haven't noticed on some of the previous slides, I am putting little snippets at the bottom for different courses or workshops or resources that I offer that may help you with some of these tasks. One really good one, they're all really good, but this one, the Struggle-Free Days webinar, is a really great tool to figure out how to provide enrichment every day for your dog in an easy way. I mean, I can't spend all day just making sure that the dog is happy. I have other things going on as well. So we want to be able to set up these schedules to make sure that the dog is getting enough attention, enough enrichment, enough exercise, all that kind of stuff, but still making it easy for us and making it more doable. So daily enrichment can be broken down into a bunch of different categories. Here's some ideas. Food enrichment, super easy. Put something in a Kong and give it to your dog, or put their kibble in a puzzle bowl, or do something that's a little bit more interesting so that they're not just eating out of a normal bowl and just inhaling their food and done with it. Give them some sort of problem to solve with that food. Kongs are a really good option, and you don't even have to use a Kong brand. If you have a different option that the dog can work on figuring out how to get the food out of the object, that's going to be a really good resource for food enrichment. Scent enrichment is giving them new things to smell. So that could be taking them out on a sniffy walk. That could be bringing something into the house that your dog hasn't smelled before and letting them examine that. Environmental enrichment kind of goes into what we talked about previously with getting your dog some outside exposure in new places. Giving them those new areas to explore is a big one. Cognitive enrichment might be learning a new skill. So have your kids teach the dog a new trick today, and that's a great way to check off that enrichment task for you. Social enrichment is going to be new friends, which might be the hardest one when we're dealing with a pandemic. But there's a lot of different options for that and different ways we can work on socializing our dog and allowing them to play with other dogs or meeting new people in safe ways too. So we can talk more about that in our group classes or in private sessions if you're interested. And then the flip side of that, a lot of these points have kind of different sides of the same coin. So we want to make sure that we're getting our dogs lots of enrichment. We want to make sure we're going out, but we also want to make sure we're leaving them home alone occasionally, and we want to make sure they're getting lots of downtime. Dogs need naps. Really, really need naps. If they don't get naps, they are naughty. I can guarantee it. 90% of the time when someone has a problem with their brand new baby puppy, it's because the dog is not getting enough sleep. So something to think about. I know you might think that your dog kind of naps all day, and they might be like my dogs, hanging out with me in the office, just kind of chilling. But if your dogs are always in a house full of humans, they don't tend to sleep as often or as soundly. So for example, if I were to get up right now, both my dogs would jump up and follow me. So when they are always around people, they don't tend to get that deep sleep that they really need. So give your dog a quiet space where they can have a separate area to nap and schedule that into your routine. I guarantee it'll be better for everybody in the household if your dog has that regular nap schedule. It's just like a toddler. We don't want them to be tired and cranky. It also helps give the dogs a break from each other. If you have multiple dogs in the house, giving them their own nap areas can really help with that too. So that's also something to think about, making sure they're getting those naps, even though there's a lot of people in the house and it seems like there's a lot going on. We want to make sure they're getting that sleep. And then the next one is brush up on your basics. So we talked about enrichment. You can do cognitive enrichment, which is getting them to think and learn. Sometimes when we are with our dogs all the time, we don't tend to prioritize our time to make sure that it's actually going to be helpful for us in the long run. What I mean by that is if I'm home all day, I hang out with the dogs all day, so I kind of feel like I'm checking that box, like they got plenty of attention from me. But just hanging out may not be helping us. So it's not hurting us, it's great to hang out, but it might not be helping us move forward with our goals. So again, kind of looking at that New Year's resolution idea, I want to make sure that our dogs are getting better. So when you are hanging out with them, throw in these little snippets of practice, just short 2 to 10 minute training sessions, just to work on those basic skills. It might be stuff your dog already knows that you just want to kind of brush up on, or it might be stuff that you want to add in. Maybe you haven't worked on certain skills yet. So little things. Ask your dog to sit and give them a treat. Have them work on a couple second stay. Give them a goodie for that. Practice their recall outside. Really be mindful and intentional about your training time so that all those skills stay really well installed. Makes life with the dog so much easier if they're responsive when they need to be. Again, I mentioned that there's a few little course ideas listed throughout this presentation. So on here I have check out the levels courses. So we offer all different levels for different skill sets. So I have a puppy pre-K course, a primary school 101 course. Dogs are busy today. A prep school 201 course and a PhD 301 course. So there's all different levels depending on where we're at with our dog in their training program. Continuing through the levels or even reviewing a level you did previously might be a good way to kind of brush up those skills. And then our last one is practice passing the puppy. So what I mean by that, I call it a leash handoff. Is your dog comfortable going from you to another person? And are they kind of controllable through that process? So you might have a dog that's like, oh my God, there's a new human. And they take off running to that person and they're very excited to leave mom in the dust. You might have a dog that is totally opposite, where they're like, oh my God, there's a new person, and they're hiding behind you. So we want to make sure that they're good going both directions in those handoff procedures. So for example, curbside pickup and drop off is the new thing in pandemic lifestyle. So if you go to the vet, if you go to the groomer, if you do training walks with me, we do these leash handoffs where you're holding one end of the leash, you send the dog to the person either grabs the leash or clips on their own and then goes about their business. And then they do that switch when they come back. And that way you guys can maintain that social distance. You can stay far apart from each other throughout that process while you're handing the dog over. I'm noticing a lot of dogs are really struggling with this, and I've always done similar procedures. So it's interesting to see the change now that they're practicing this in those contexts like the veterinarian, in those contexts like the groomer, and then they come to the trainer, which in theory should be a pretty fun experience, and they're like, I don't want to do that leash handoff, that's terrifying. So we want them to practice this. You can just do this with members of the family, practice sending the dog back and forth. And then if you do have maybe someone outside the house that wants to practice this with you that can kind of serve as your quote stranger, that would be a good option too to add into the mix. I am going to post a training video on this, if depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching this in the future, it might already be out. So check the Positively Trained Facebook and Instagram pages. There's also a YouTube channel that you can check out that will have this video uploaded there too. So that'll be released in the near future if it's not out already, that actually talks about the training steps to teach your dog to go from point A to point B and teach them how to do that easily and politely, so they're not jumping on everybody in a wiggly hot mess during that process. So that's going to be a resource available for you soon. But until then, like I said, you can just practice sending the dog back and forth around the house just with some recall. So one person calls the dog, the other person calls the dog back, just to get them more familiar with that skill. Other resources that are available for you guys, I mentioned those 7 tips. Definitely think about all of those. Really, if you can incorporate those into your normal routines, that's the easiest way to do training. You don't want it to be a whole project. You want it to be something really achievable and actionable. I mentioned a lot of different resources throughout. So the leash walking workshop, the confinement training workshop to teach them how to be left, the struggle-free days webinar. There's a lot of different things in there that are going to be really helpful. But additionally, I offer virtual learning. So I have group classes that are offered through Zoom during the pandemic, private sessions also available through the virtual platform. And then every month we have a puppy parent support group, which is just a free meeting. Super laid back and casual, but it's a question answer opportunity. So you can chat with me, ask me any questions that are coming up about your dog, and we just all hang out really casual and chat about dogs. So that's going to be the first Monday of every month. If you're not already in the client portal, if you don't already have that set up, then start there. So go to the website, create your client account, and then you can enroll directly in that free session. In terms of dog training, because really I do mostly owner training, if you guys know me, but in terms of dog training, I am offering the training walks, like I had mentioned before, as well as the after school program, which is a puppy socialization program. Those are available for clients that are local or at least able to get to the training studio, and I can do some hands-on time with your puppy. And then there are self-study courses available too. So there's an online platform with super easy to follow instruction and video demonstration and all kinds of cool stuff. There's webinars, workshops, full courses, lots of options there for continued learning from home. And then there's a training handouts library, which is free for any clients that are already signed up in a training program. There's tons of resources in there. There's handouts that talk about puppy biting and potty training, all the way up to advanced socialization protocols and social skills and out in public behavior. I mean, there's a wide range of things in there. And then my newest release, if you guys haven't seen it, is there's a new free webinar available. It's called the Welcome Home webinar. So if you guys either are adding a new dog to your household, whether it's a puppy or an adult dog, or if you have done that, or if you will be doing that in the future, definitely a good resource. Or if you know anyone that's adding a new dog, definitely point them in that direction. It's a really easy to follow guide for kind of your shopping list, all the things that you should be getting and preparing to prep for that new dog in your house, as well as things to think about. All these problem behaviors a lot of times can be avoided if we just have a good setup from the beginning for our new dog. So it's a really good way to kind of brainstorm and get prepared for adding a new furry family member to your household. So that's a really good option too. Again, available on the website, positivelytraineddogs.com. You can find links for everything there. And if you have any questions, just let me know. But I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I look forward to seeing you in 2021.